All right, for the conclusion of The Speckled Man, a Sherlock Holmes mystery. Remember that Sherlock has the case. Excuse me, let me put this up. And that they're going to the house on Stoke Moran. And he told Watson all he needed. All they needed was his revolver and a toothbrush. So they're on their way to check out the manor. At Waterloo, we were fortunate in catching a train for Leatherhead, where we hired a trap. Remember, trap is like a small wagon. At the station inn, and drove for 4 or 5 miles through the lovely Surrey lanes. It was a perfect day, with a bright sun and a few fleecy clouds in the heavens. The trees and the wayside hedges were just throwing out their first green shoots, and the air was full of the pleasant smell of the moist earth. To me, at least, there was a strange contrast between the sweet promise of the spring and this sinister quest upon which we were engaged. My companion sat in front of the trap, his arms folded, his hat pulled down over his eyes, and his chin sunk upon his breast, buried in the deepest of thought. Suddenly, however, he startled, tapped on my shoulder, and pointed in the meadows. "Look there!" A heavily timbered park stretched in a gentle slope, thickening into the grove at the highest point. From amidst the branches there jutted out the grey gable and the high roof tree of the very old mansion. Let me move this up just a tad. "Stoke Moran," said he. "Yes, sir. That be the house of Dr. Grimsby Roylott," marked the driver. There is building going on there," said Holmes. "That is where we are going?" "There's the village," said the driver. "But if you want to get to the house, you'll find it shorter to go over the Stype and so by the footpath over the hills. There it is, where the lady is walking." "And the lady, I fancy, is Miss Stoner," observed Holmes. "Yes, I think we had better do as you suggest." We got off, paid our fare, and the trap rattled back to its way to Leatherhead. "I thought it as well," said Holmes, as we started on the path, "that this fellow should think that we come here as architects or some other definite business. It may stop his gossip. Good afternoon, Miss Stoner. You see that we have been as good as our word." Our client of the morning had hurled forward to meet us with a face which spoke of her joy. "I have been waiting so eagerly for you. All has turned out splendidly. Dr. Roylott has gone to town, and it is unlikely that he will be back before evening." "We've had the pleasure of making the doctor's acquaintance," said Holmes. And with a few words he sketched out what had occurred. Remember how he bent the poker and threatened them and everything? Miss Stoner turned white as she listened. "Good heavens! He has followed me, then?" "So it appears." "He is so cunning that I never know when I am safe from him. What will he say when he returns?" "He must guard himself, for he may find that there is someone more cunning than himself upon his track. You must lock yourself from him tonight. If he is violent, we shall take you away to your aunt's at Harrow. Now, we must make the best use of our time, so kindly take us at once to the rooms which we are to examine." The building was of grey lichen blotched stone, with a high central portion and 2 curving wings, like the claws of a crab, thrown out on each side. Lichen-clad stone. Have you ever seen like stone walls that had grey, like green gray moss growing on it? That's lichen. It's a green gray or gray green moss growing. So I know all of you've seen that. And this house is sprawled out like sections. You have a middle part and then sectioned out. In one of these wings, the windows were broken and blocked with wood boards, while the roof was partially caved in, a picture of ruin. So in one half of the house, it's a big mansion, in one half, there's no windows. It has wood boards. You ever seen where somebody broke a window and they had to put a wood board on the window? And even the roof has collapsed in because obviously no one's living in that portion of the mansion. The central portion was in a little bit of repair, but the right but the right-hand block was comparatively modern, and the blinds in the windows with the blue smoke curling up from the chimneys showed this was where the family resided. Some scaffolding had been erected against the end wall, and the stonework had been broken into, but there were no signs of any workmen at the moment of our visit. Holmes walked slowly up and down the ill-trimmed lawn and examined with deep attention the outsides of the windows. So, ill-trimmed means it hasn't been mowed. And he notices that their scaffolding looks like work on the house is started, but there's no workmen there working now. Nothing there to look like anybody's even working on it. Just looks like it just somebody started working on it and nothing has happened. Let me find. Holmes, this, I take it, belongs to the room in which you used to sleep, the center one to your sisters, and the one next to the main building to Dr. Roylott's chamber. Exactly so. But I am now sleeping in the middle one. Did you get that? She's now sleeping in the bedroom where her sister was murdered. Pending alterations, as I understand. By the way, there does not seem to be any very pressing need for repairs at this end of the wall. There were none. I believe that it was an excuse to move me from my room. Did you catch another clue? Deductive reasoning, remember? She believes that workmen just started the project to bust a hole in her bedroom wall, so she would have to move into the bedroom where her sister was murdered. Even she thinks that. That is suggestive. Now, on the other side of this narrow wing runs the corridor from which these three rooms open. Corridor means hallway or passageway. There are windows in it, of course. Yes, but very small ones, too narrow for anyone to pass through. As you both locked your doors at night, your rooms were unapproachable from that side. Now, would you have the kindness to go into your room and to bar your shutters? Miss Stoner did so, and Holmes, after careful examination through the open window, endeavored in every way to force the shutter open, but without success. There was no slit through which a knife could be passed to raise the bar. Then with his lens, that means his magnifying lens, he tested the hinges, but they were of solid iron, built firmly into the massive masonry. He said, no one could pass these shutters if they were bolted. My theory certainly presents some difficulties. Well, we shall see if the inside throws any light upon the matter. So he's trying every way to open the windows from the outside. Even using a knife to try to pry open, none are working. When they're locked on the inside, they cannot be opened from the outside. A small side door led into the whitewashed corridor from which the three bedrooms opened. Holmes refused to examine the third chamber. That was her old bedroom. He's not even going to look into it. He's only going to look into the chamber she's staying in now, her sister's old bedroom, which is her sister's old bedroom, and the doctor's bedroom. So we passed at once to the second, that in which Miss Stoner was now sleeping, and which her sister had met her fate. It was a homely little room with a low ceiling and gaping fireplace, after the fashion of old country houses. A brown chest of drawers stood in one corner, a narrow white counterpaned bed in another, and a dressing table on the left-hand side of the windows. These articles, with two small wicker wood chairs, made up all the furniture in the room, save for the square of Wilton carpet in the center. The boards round, and the paneling of the walls were brown, worm-eaten oak, so old and discolored that it may have dated from the original building of the house. Holmes drew one of the chairs into a corner and sat silent, while his eyes traveled round and round, up and down, taking in every detail of the apartment. Where does that bell communicate with? He asked, at last pointing to a thick bell rope which hung down beside the bed, the tassel actually lying on the pillow. Now remember, this is before telephones. This is before speakers, all that stuff, speaker boxes. So what they used to do, if they needed help, they had a rope beside their bed or beside a chair, And they could pull that rope, and up on the top, up in the ceiling, it was attached to bells. Or one bell, maybe more bells, depending. And they could pull the rope, and somebody would hear the bell and come and help them in their bedroom. But when he pulled the rope, listen what happens. All right, excuse me. I'm not going to give it away yet. She says, it goes to the housekeeper's room. It looks newer than the other things. Yes, it's only put there a couple years ago. Your sister asked for it, I suppose. No, I never heard her using it. We used to always get what we wanted for ourselves. Indeed, it seemed unnecessary to put so nice a bell pull there. You'll excuse me for a few minutes while I satisfy myself as to the floor. He threw himself down upon his face with his lens in his hand, remember his magnifying glass in his hand, and crawled swiftly forwards and backwards, examining minutely the cracks between the boards. Then he did the same with the woodwork with the chamber was paneled. So that means he's examining every crack on the floor, seeing if any floorboard can come up, like anybody could crawl under the flooring, could come up from the floor into the bedroom. Then he's examining all the walls. Is there any hidden passageways in the walls or anything? So he's trying everything. Finally, he walked over to the bed and spent some time staring at it. In running his eye up and down the wall, finally he took the bell rope, remember that rope we just talked about, in his hand and gave it a pull. Why, it's a dummy, he said. Won't it ring? No, it's not even attached to a wire. See, because those ropes would be attached to wires, which would be attached to a bell. He pulls. Nothing's ringing. It's not only is it not ringing, he looks up and it's not even attached to anything. It's just hanging from the wall. This is very interesting. You can see now that it is fastened to a hook just above where the little opening of the ventilator is. How very absurd. I've never noticed that before. Very strange, said Holmes, pulling the rope again. There are one or two very singular points about this room. For example, what a fool of a builder must be to open a ventilator in another room when, with the same trouble, he might have communicated with the outside air. That is also modern? That is also modern, said the lady. Done about the same time as the bell rope, remarked Holmes. Yes, there were several little changes carried out about that time. They seem to have been a most interesting character. Dummy bell ropes, ventilators which do not ventilate. With your permission, Miss Stoner, we shall now carry our research into the inner apartment. That means the doctor's room. A ventilator. Now remember, this is before air conditioning. And we all know what vents are. But with air conditioning, you can have a vent on the floor or in the wall. Well, back then, what they did, instead of leaving the windows open all the time, because, bugs can come in and all sorts of stuff, rain, anything. They used to make little holes, little vents, but little tiny, about this big or so. And it would go to the outside, and it was covered up, but they could feel the breeze coming in, so you wouldn't have, so it'd be like a vent for an air conditioner, but it would go to the outside, so you wouldn't get rain and bugs coming through there, but you'd get a cool breeze, air coming through, cool off the room or whatever. Or even if, remember they didn't have heat, so if they lit a fire in the fireplace, the smoke wouldn't fill up the room. It would go outside. But her vent doesn't go outside. It goes to the doctor's room. And there's a bell pull in her room that isn't hooked to bells. It does nothing. It's just attached to the ceiling. And a vent that doesn't go outside for fresh air. But it goes to the doctor's room. Dr. Grimsby Roylott's chamber was larger than that of his stepdaughter, but was as plainly furnished. A camp bed, a small wooden shelf full of books, mostly the technical character, an armchair beside the bed, a plain wooden chair against the wall, a round table, and a large iron safe were the principal things that met the eye. And you know what a safe is, where you keep valuables, and those big, a large iron safe. You've seen those like in banks or something. Not as big as a bank, one that fills up a whole room, but a bigger one, about the size of a table. Holmes walked slowly round and examined each and all of them with the keenest interest. What's in here? What's in here? He asked, tapping the safe. My stepfather's business papers. Oh, you have seen inside then? Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of papers. There isn't a cat in there, for example. No. What a strange idea, Mr. Holmes. Well, look at this. He took up a small saucer of milk which stood on the top of the safe. You know what a saucer of milk? You know, those little saucers put milk in for the cats. No, we don't keep a cat. But there is a cheetah and a baboon. Ah, yes, of course. Well, a cheetah is just a big cat, but yet a saucer of milk does not go very far in satisfying its wants. I dare say. Because, you know, a little saucer of milk for a kitty won't fill up a cheetah. So that doesn't make sense, having a little saucer of milk. There is one point which I should wish to determine. He squatted down in front of the wood chair and examined the seat of which with great attention. Thank you. That is quite settled, he said, rising and putting his lens in his pocket. Hello, here's something interesting. The object which caught his eye was a small dog leash hung on one corner of the bed. You know what a dog leash is, where you walk your dog? But it's a small one for a small dog. The leash, however, was curled upon itself and tied so as to make a loop of a whipcord. So it was for a small dog, but it was even whipped a couple of more times to make it even smaller. Weird. What do you make of that, What do you make of that, Watson? It's a common enough leash, but I don't know why it should be tied. That is not so common, is it? Ah, me, it's a wicked world, and when a clever man turns his brain to crime, it is the worst of all. I think that I have seen enough now, Miss Stoner, and with your permission, we shall walk out upon the lawn. I had never seen my friend's face so grim, and his brow so dark as it was when we turned from the scene of this investigation. We had walked several times up and down the lawn, neither Miss Stoner nor myself liking to break it in upon his thoughts before he roused himself from his reverie. It is very essential, Miss Stoner, said Mr. Holmes, that you should absolutely follow my advice in every aspect. I shall most certainly do. The matter's too serious for any hesitation. Your life may depend upon your compliance. That means you have to. He's telling Miss Stoner she has to follow every bit of his instructions, or she may die. I assure you that I am in your hands. In the first place, both my friend and I must spend the night in your room. Both Miss Stoner and I gazed in astonishment. Yes, it must be so. Let me explain. I believe that is the village inn over there? Yes, that is the Crown. Very good. Your windows should be visible from there. Certainly. You must confine yourself to your room on the pretense of a headache. When your stepfather comes back, then, when you hear him retire for the night, you must open the shutters of your window, undo the hasp, put your lamp there as a signal to us, then withdraw with everything which you are likely to want into your room, which you use to occupy. I have no doubt that, in spite of the repairs, you could manage there for one night. Oh, yes, easily. The rest you will leave in our hands. But what will you do? We shall spend the night in your room, and we shall investigate the cause of this noise which disturbed you. I believe, Mr. Holmes, that you've already made up your mind, said Miss Stoner. Perhaps I have. Now, before we go on, let me explain what he's telling her to do. He's telling her that he and Watson are going to go to the village inn because the mansion's up on top of the hill, and you'll find out they're going to stay at the second floor of the hotel. They can see her bedroom from their hotel room. Now, they can't stay there because if the doctor comes home and sees them there, all their plans